Welcome welcome on to the Tortillas and Takes podcast. You are on once again with your boy, Albie Shore. And, as we are in 2025, I've been happily married for over 8 years. I've been with my old ball and chain for a while now. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean I don't know what heartbreak feels like. I know what heartbreak feels like, and instead of getting my heart broken by women like back in the day, instead I have sports teams to break my heart. And though in the NFL, my Texans haven't broken my heart yet, I know it's happening this weekend, so I know that's only going to come here pretty soon. In college basketball, Texas Tech knows how to break my heart in ways that are unique and different and all the same. And they did that this past weekend, losing to the third-ranked Iowa State Cyclones by one measly point in overtime. So to talk about that, I first got to bring on our boy, the Red Raider expert himself, Joe Lopez. What's going on, Joe?
Heartbreak. Absolute heartbreak, given some of the circumstances that were going on before that game and going into this game. I mean, me and you both called that this was going to be closer than what we had thought, but a loss nonetheless. But to watch it play out and to watch them lose in that way was very difficult. And yeah, heartbreak to the highest. And, I'm glad I wasn't there in person watching it.
Yeah. It wasn't so much better to not be in person. What a loser to be there in person and watch the heartbreak straight up. Our other person on this podcast, People's Champ Jeremy Gillen, what were you doing during that time?
I was in person. I was hanging out at the USA with all the local favorites. Everybody who's anybody was there. Tough game for attendance because the dormitories did not open until Sunday today when we were recording. So like students that are freshmen that are usually like excited to be at games, they fill it out, right? Nothing else to do. They couldn't be there. They had to wait another day before they could move back into the dorm. So surprised with how at the noise level was awesome. The energy was fun, and it was fun all the way up until the last moment. And then it sucked. And then the walk back to the parking lot sucked. I got in on the grace and generosity of others, and we had a parking pass at the Womble. And I'm like, that's awesome. Apparently, that's not really awesome at all, because most of the time afterwards, I just spent sitting in like one of those parking lot lines to get out. So I spent like 30 minutes in that thing. It's awful, terrible. But happy to be on the pod to talk about what we do best. I think about this sometimes. It's like I would love to see how many recap pods we do. Like, what's the win-loss percentage on our recap pods? Like, how often do we get to actually talk about victory on this podcast? Not very often. So, staying humble here on Tortillas and Takes.
Or how often, I guess really more so is how often do we have disappointing recaps, right? Like sometimes you expect to lose. I think if we would have lost, Joe, by what we thought, which was like a 12-point or an 8-point loss, where Iowa State controls it from top to bottom, like we're upset, but we're not surprised. I think we get on this podcast and we're like, well, it's the number 3 team in the country. It is what it is. It happens, right? Like that wouldn't be disappointing, right? Because it would have been expected. It would have been a microcosm a little bit more of what we've seen of this team last month. But it would have been like, like now this is heartbreak. How many times we go on the pod and we're like, this is, oh man, we were right there. If only. Texas Tech, it's tough being a Tech fan, man. It is tough. Because sometimes I think about, I got some buddies who are Purdue fans, and sometimes I think about it, and they talk about how tough it is to be a Purdue fan. I'm like, no, because when y'all suck, you just suck, right? Like you're not, when y'all suck, you're just getting whooped by 20 points a game. You know what I mean? You know you're going to be bad. It's fine, right? When you suck, you just suck. When Kansas sucks, they just suck in football. It is what it is. There's no expectations. You just suck, right? It's different because I think with Tech, when I was at Tech and we were the worst basketball team in the conference, there was a bit of bliss in the fact that, okay, we're just really bad. We're just really bad. And the worst thing Tubby Smith gave us was a competent basketball team. Because now it's like, dang it. We're competitive in these games. We're barely losing to Andrew Wiggins and Joel Embiid in Kansas, right? 2 years ago, we were getting beat by 30. Now we're barely losing. We have hope. And we have competent basketball. Now, 10 plus years later, we have a basketball team that's more than competent. They're a basketball team that some people picked as a dark horse in the conference. And I think this year, through injuries, through inconsistent play, through bad defense, this team has really struggled in certain capacities. But in this game against Iowa State, they played, in my opinion, the best. The first 10 minutes was the best basketball they played the entire season. And there's not a close second. And even the remaining 30 minutes of regulation, I would still argue was the best game Tech had played up to that point. So as we and that really starts off with a scenario where they're up and they're really controlling the game right from the very beginning, really having Iowa State on the ropes, having a scenario where they're up by 10 plus points early in the game, right? And so as the game really started out there and you were looking at a 26-16 lead within the first 13 minutes of the game, I mean, how were you feeling? You're on mute there, Jeremy.
Well, there goes the supreme wisdom I just dropped. It was nothing like we've expected, nothing I've seen this season, right? I was sitting next to an Iowa State fan, probably the only one in the lower bowl, but and he was really cool. He was really chill. But I was like, I'm really excited. This should be a pretty good game. As long as we can hang around with you guys at the beginning, that'll be satisfactory for me. And about 10 minutes in, whatever, he leans over and goes, I think we're trying to hang on to y'all at this point, bud. It's like, hey, I had never seen this team before, so you and me are both we're both having a surprise moment. But impressive. And I think one of the biggest things was having the energy early. Shooting was great. Awesome. But the one thing I think we've all been kind of waiting for this team to do is play good defense. And playing in man, we were on the ball early. We were pressuring well. We were forcing them to take shots that they were not comfortable with. We had all the pressure on Iowa State early. And I mean, you could tell that they were feeling it. Right. And so that's what got me excited. That's what made me feel like, oh, this game's going to be a lot different. This will be a lot different than we played this year. It was electric, man. It was really, really fun to be there.
Joe, as the first quarter was going, we really, really took it to them early on. Was there any feeling, especially as the first half was ending, when Iowa State went from a double-digit deficit to kind of nipping at our heels at the end of the first half? Did you feel like it was subsiding, or did you still feel good going into halftime?
I felt it was subsiding a little bit. You start having these foul troubles with some of these key components of your team, Elijah Hawkins, D5, and one more foul, and then they're going to have to sit for some periods of time. I wasn't feeling great. I was like, okay, we just need to weather this a little bit. Our defense had been good, so now we're going to have to be two guys on our defense are going to have to sit back a little bit on the defensive side so they don't pick up a cheap foul and have to sit on the bench for a while. And then ultimately what happens, you pick up a cheap foul, and the key component on our offensive side of the basketball in Elijah Hawkins, I think he had 9 or 10 assists up until this point whenever he got pulled with that fourth foul. Man, that was a backbreaker for us. The offense just, I can't say it fully sputtered, but you could tell that there was some major differences on how the offense was running without him on the court. So I wasn't feeling great, but I was like, okay, maybe we can still weather this storm.
Well, I was even going to say, I think when Darren Williams got his third foul towards the end of the first half, that it was almost tough for him to get going in the game in general. Because every time it seemed like, okay, I'm getting my foot under him, he gets taken out for foul trouble, right? Now, in the second half, it wasn't as bad. And I think he played virtually the entire second half. He was able to keep that under control. But it almost felt like in the first half, especially, Darren Williams was taken out because of foul trouble. And in the second half, Elijah Hawkins, like you mentioned, especially like Elijah Hawkins. Every single time he was ready to go, he got taken out. Elijah Hawkins I think he ended up he had 0 turnovers in this game. So he had 0 turnovers in this game, was doing a great job facilitating. Let me tell you something, that bounce pass he had in the second half to Chase McMillan on a fast break, one-handed, in motion, bounce pass, like one of those bounce passes that would make Red Auerbach shed a tear, right? Like it was a absolute, like, and those are some simple plays that, some fan who watches NBA highlights are going to be like, okay, what's the big deal? And I'm like, no, that's a coach's freaking dream. Like that is an amazing pass that people don't really fundamentally know anymore unless you're a Chris Paul disciple. And so that was a pass. And I know Joe and Jeremy, you mentioned in the chat where I'm like, Joe, you've been talking about 2 guys particularly that you've been singing the praises of, and you've been saying how good they are, what impacts they can make. And one of them being Elijah Hawkins, right? The fact that, and I think we're seeing a pass like that, seeing the way he was able to facilitate this game, I'm like, oh my God, this guy is everything Joe was talking about, even in the preseason before we even saw him for a second. And the other guy, Christian Anderson. Christian Anderson off the bench was great, really filled in the gaps when Darian Williams was struggling, especially from his shot. When JT Toppin, who at times was getting bullied a little bit, and we needed some of that offensive production. And mind you, Toppin still had 18 points. I'm not saying he didn't have production, but Christian Anderson at some point almost felt like he couldn't miss at a certain point in time. And so those 2 guys, I think, came up huge in this game, Joe.
Yeah, I've been singing Christian Anderson's praises from the start. I've seen him practice a handful of times, and I'll still keep on singing his praises. And I'm saying that he is going to be a more impactful freshman than Jahmias Ramsey. And that's really, really hard for me to say to a degree because we all know how good Jahmias was. But I just think for the future, because I don't think he's leaving us after 1 year, or at least I wouldn't hope he would. But man, this guy's about to be a problem in the Big 12 for the years to come because he just has that awareness and prowess on the basketball court that you just don't teach. You just either you have it or you don't. He's years ahead of where he needs to be at this age. And, scrappy kid, no moment's too big for him. And man, he really showcased his talents against a really, really good Iowa State defensive team. So, I mean, if you're looking at silver lining and things you could take away from this game, Christian Anderson's rise that continues is one of those things you could take away.
Absolutely. And so as we kind of think about this game here, for 30 minutes, Tech had been leading, had been in control from the very beginning, even at halftime as they nipped at our heels a little bit, made it a 6-point game. It was still Tech leading for 30 minutes. Then with 10 minutes and 40 seconds to go in the second half, it was for the first time all game, Iowa State had the lead. Or actually, sorry, with 9 minutes, 22 seconds, Iowa State had the lead. Had a 3-point lead, now 58-55. And I mentioned, you talked about the crowd earlier, Jeremy, and we had talked pre-pod as far as the crowd. And with everything going on, we even talked about it in the preview pod, Joe and I, as far as, curious how the crowd was going to be. Classes haven't started yet. The dorm's not opening. The fact that the crowd that was going to be there was going to have to be the Lubbock for the most part, more than Tech students, or Tech, at least not Tech, dorm students anyway. Except for those, some of these Tech people got a little bit extra money. Their mom's like, "Yeah, I'll get you a hotel, sweetie, for the night." Maybe those students are on campus. But there was a question about how big the crowd was going to be, and up until going down by 3, the crowd was okay, right? It wasn't a Raider riot. It was just an okay hum, cheers when it happens, kind of like. I don't know. The crowd kind of felt like a Texas Longhorn basketball game. They're there, but not really impactful, right? When Lipsy made that 3-pointer to go for the Texas to be down for the first time in the game, right after that, Darian Williams went right back and made a smooth 3-point jumper to tie it right back up. Boom, the crowd was right back in it. I think from that moment on, the crowd that had been kind of taking the lead for granted was like, oh, we got to be in this game. We got to actually impose ourselves. From that moment on, I felt the Raider Ride at points and times carrying forward. My God, this is the Raider Ride as advertised. Right before that point, and maybe not so much, but that 3-point shot, there was another 3-point shot later on there when you hear almost like you hear the Mike Breen bang in the background, like that was like that pop of the crowd going forward. Jeremy, how did you feel like the crowd, especially in that last 10 minutes, was able to carry the team forward?
And I actually would tell you that I think that all kind of began as a snowball when Toppin got hurt, and we may come back to that, but I think when he went down, hush over the crowd, right? Like everybody was like, get up, please get up. I tweeted that gif of like Simba and Mufasa. I'm like, get up, because you're kind of the king of this thing right now. Like we need you. But the nature of like how Iowa State was really starting to get chippy under the basket, or just be in the wrong place at the right time. Like fans don't like that, right? Fans want to protect our players, blah, blah, blah. The getting behind was kind of like, man, like something really happened there, because now we're kind of falling apart at the seams. So when Darian Williams hit that, D5 hit that 3-pointer, it was like, nope, we are back in it, and we got to put the pedal to the metal. And so, like you said, I mean, after that, that's when they really started throwing up that, this is how loud you are. This is the scale, they're showing you kind of the loudness scale. And every time that went up there, everybody just went more nuts. There was a time where Coach McGuire got up and he was throwing his hands up, down, everybody went nuts, right? Everybody was really kind of into it in that moment, from the top bowl to the bottom bowl to on court side. It felt really exciting. It felt like a tournament game in that moment, because of how excited everybody was, how good Iowa State was, but how gritty Texas Tech was playing, right? It was like echoes of like 2019's the desire to win, right? You could feel it. And that was really cool. It was a really cool moment that made me feel like it's still there, right? That magic is still there. This idea that the USA is one of the hardest, Big 12 arenas to play in. That's still there. It was cool, man. It was really cool. It was a good moment. And then when Toppin checks back in, that got really loud. Like it was just every little thing we could find to like everybody get behind. That's exactly where it was.
Toppin checking back in, I think, was huge. I will say, and Toppin, I mentioned it before, he did get bullied in this game a bit, right? And some of the players on this team are using tech as a way to go to the NBA. I think when the season started, it was a thought of, okay, we know there's one player that has NBA on the horizon on this team, and that's JT Toppin. We know that for him, he's like, all right, best case scenario, I'm going to come to Tech, I'm going to ball the F out, and then I'm going to be a first-round pick in the NBA draft next year. And that's actually, I would argue that's still the trajectory currently. But now I think one of the things that, and I even tweeted it, one of the things we're seeing on this team is he may not be the only NBA player. Darren Williams is getting more and more looks from outside of Lubbock. It's like, hey, have y'all seen this number 5 at Texas Tech? He's averaging 16 points a game. He's pretty good, right? Joe, you mentioned Christian Anderson as another guy, maybe not this year, but in the future to look out, like NBA guys may start looking out for. Elijah Hawkins is another one that I think is somebody that may be looking out as far as a dark horse candidate there. But I do think when I was watching this game and seeing JT Toppin, I remember watching this game thinking, these are the kind of the guys you got to get bigger on. These are the guys you're going to have to learn how to bang on, because in this game, I saw numerous times where Momcilovic was able to kind of use his power. And this is also, mind you, Iowa State went small for a lot of this game. Both teams went small for a lot of this game. Right? JT Toppin played the small ball 5 a lot in this game. But the fact that you have a guy like Josh Jefferson, who also played Iowa State's quote-unquote small ball 5, and Josh Jefferson kind of just moved Toppin around a lot of times on offense, right? He was their second leading scorer at 17 points, 8 rebounds in this game, and then a lot of it was in Toppin's face. And so when I was watching this game, I'm like, man, Toppin, like that's the kind of guys you're going to be going up against in the league, right? And NBA is not this muscle-hungry league like it used to be, but there's still some guys in there that's still going to, little boy you. And so that I think was one thing that I did think not just Toppin, but Tech as a whole, with Federico not playing as much in this small ball scenario, I would have liked more of that aspect of Tech really. Like we talk about toughest team wins. Iowa State a lot of times in this game looked like the tougher team. I mean, they out-rebounded us total at 16, out-rebounded us, especially in the defensive end, a lot. We were able to get a lot more offensive rebounds just because of the deep shots we were taking. But just in general, under the basket, it was Christmas at times. It was the ability for Jefferson, especially to get to the rack, I think definitely hurt us in the second half. And it hurt us in one particular play more than anything. And that wasn't on top end, but just in general, getting bullied down there was I think, something that wasn't great, Joe.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we got what the BYU fans got when Darian Williams was taking them down low towards the end of the game in Provo. Just that same kind of treatment there, and to be on the opposite side of that, it sucks. Our guys were getting bullied. We weren't the toughest team at points in this game, down low on the block. And another unsung player on the Iowa State team is that Chatfield guy. He didn't come from like some big power school, but I mean, I think they were plus 10 with him on the court. And then just another big guy that they had that, was just giving them meaningful minutes. And, that's just one thing, about JT Toppin's game. I mean, he's just going to have to, you're just like you said, he's going to see it in the league next year. He's going to have to get stronger underneath the basket. Who knows if it was because of his ankle in the second half to where he couldn't, find that leverage as much as he did in the first half. But, we don't know exactly the extent of that injury or how bad it was, but we do know he came back. So, but just really tough to watch us, because we really, or Coach McCaslin and crew really, really emphasized on rebounding this year in the off season. And it really hurt us in this particular game.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we one other piece for Iowa State, you talked about Chatfield off the bench. Before in the preview pod, Joe, we talked about Josh Jefferson, right, being their main big man offensively and defensively in this game, right? Marshalovic really didn't do much, but how they spread it around. So you had Jefferson. We talked about how Keshawn Gilbert was going to be somebody to look out for. Keshawn Gilbert had 14 points in this game. I think overall we did a pretty good job of slowing him down and making sure that he was okay. One guy we didn't do a great job of was another guy we talked about in defending was Curtis Jones. And Curtis Jones, hey, that man right there, he balled. He was sometimes the stars shine bright when they need to. Curtis Jones, especially down the stretch, you were talking about Jefferson and imposing it down low. What about a guy that just imposed it in general on the perimeter? Down low didn't matter. Curtis Jones in the second half was there, and he definitely felt the impact of that. So, talking about the end of the game in general, right? So now we're in a dogfight. Now it's back and forth. We had at one point a 4-point lead at 7 minutes to go, was erased almost immediately, right? But we get to a point where we are up to, right, 20 seconds to go, we're fouled. We got on the line, we have Elijah Hawkins. All right, Elijah Hawkins, one of our best free throw shooters, 20 seconds to go. You make both of these, buddy boy, we are good. You make your second 90% free throw shooter, second best free throw shooter on the team, right? The only guy that's better is a guy that apparently doesn't play basketball anymore. Just joking. He technically played in this game, Kerwin Walton, but does anybody remember? But anyways, Elijah Hawkins, 90% free throw shooter, the best case scenario to be in this game at this time and shooting these free throws, and he misses one. So now you're only up 3 with 20 seconds to go, right? So Iowa State says, we're just going to get a quick, easy layup. Hey, we're just going to go to the hole, right, and make a quick, easy layup right there and put the ball back in Texas Tech hands because Texas Tech is going to need to make both free throws in order to be able to win this game, right? And that makes a lot of sense. So what ends up happening is up by one now. In this scenario, we get at the line. I'm trying to look and see, remember who actually was the one that had it at the line. I believe it was it Chance. It was Chance, right? Yeah, Chance McMillan. Chance McMillan was back at the line. Again, Chance McMillan, a very good free throw shooter. At the moment, was 4 for 4 in this game at the free throw line. You're like, okay, he hasn't missed a free throw yet. Chance McMillan, one of our best free throw shooters, having a pretty decent game right now, right? On the year, Chance McMillan is an 89% free throw shooter. We should be good. And once again, he misses the first free throw. And it's funny because at the time, I think it was 5 seconds left to go in the game. And I was thinking, man, is it beneficial to miss the free throw? If we play hard defense, they may have to go for a three-pointer anyway. So let's just – I was like, you know what? A lot of time, they go coast to coast. Let's make it. And he makes it. We do something that's interesting as well. Both after the Elijah Hawkins free throw and after the Chance McMillan free throw, Iowa State had no timeouts. Texas Tech, Chance McCaslin calls a timeout in both scenarios to set up the defense, and that's a choice, right? Like that's a choice to do so. I tweeted this that I wasn't a fan of that. Somebody else responded back to me, and I agree with this comment wholeheartedly that it's setting up your offense is so much more important than setting up your defense. When you call that timeout from a defensive aspect, you're giving them it was a blessing in disguise for Iowa State. They're like, oh, thank you, right? Both scenarios, they were like, hey, we're going to give the opportunity for Gilbert to go all the way down and score. In this area, we give him a timeout as well. So 5.7 seconds to go on the clock. They go coast to coast. Right, almost stumbles. I think it was Jones, almost stumbles, but is able to drop it off at the last second to Josh Jefferson, who makes a layup right on the basket to tie it up. So, Jeremy, two things. One, missed free throws. I feel like a freaking canary on a team that's a pretty good free throw shooting team. It'd be different years before when we did not have a good free throw shooting team and it was just a bane of our existence. We had 90% free throw shooters at the line, and both of them missed. And if one of them makes a free throw, we win in regulation. But they both missed a free throw. There's that. And then also McCaslin's timeouts. What are your thoughts on both?
Yeah, I understand some of the grief about the timeouts. It did seem inopportune, but I'm, again, not a basketball coach. So that's something in kind of that arena where I maybe he's seeing something we don't, or he's seeing something that in his experience. I mean, we can't call McCaslin a winner and then look at him when he does and I go, what the hell are you doing, guy? Like, you don't know what you're doing. Because none of us are coaching, right? So that one I can't press into as hard. The free throws, man, it does suck. I immediately after the game, I tweeted about how upset I was about the last play being called, getting fouled up. I thought that was so dumb, and I still do, just because of how the calls were there and then they weren't there. That call is fine, but I was just like, I would have loved more consistency from the ref. The free throws were a big issue for me, though, because you did everything you could. You put it in the right guy's hands. And I don't want to be also overly critical of those guys because they did do a lot for you throughout the game. But it is like, man, if we would have just had the one free throw go in. Let me posit something else for you that I thought about after. There was a small stretch where our boy Kevin Overton came in, and went through Kevin Overton a lot. And Kevin Overton took 5 shots. A couple of them, probably 3 or 4, I was like, I don't know why you shot that. That ended up getting nothing. And there was the Kevin Overton stretch where Iowa State crept, and then got right there back with us. And my buddy texted me after and goes, I think Kevin Overton lost us that game. And at the moment, I was like, I'm so bad about the foul, blah, blah, blah. And then I look back, I'm like, I kind of want to watch that stretch again. Because maybe if he passed off, maybe if we tried to, I don't know. So there's those things across the game. For me, it's that Kevin Overton stretch, but definitely free throws, man. You don't want to have to lose by one of the simplest shots in the game, especially when you're at home. You got to hit those free throws, man.
I will say KO did get benched and did not come back in the game for the last, I think 8 minutes or whatever much it was. After that stretch. So that, you know what, that's actually a really great point, right? I will say it wasn't just him during that time. It was it was a stretch of one not great defense being played. Iowa State really be able to creep back in because we were letting some things subside. But what would have helped is if that we weren't breaking so much during that time period, not just him, but also Darian Williams was also missing some of those shots as well. And so very good piece on that one. It's just, I think the free throw piece though, just it really sucks when you do have 299. You send your two best free throw shooters to the line to hit 4 free throws. At least 3 of them got to go in, right? If you hit one more free throw, you're going to win in regulation, or at least force them to something serious. Definitely would not have expected that. So with that, Joe, also, what did you think as far as that end sequence? Was there anything else we could have done besides the free throws and the timeouts?
Another part of that is the referees adding that half a second back to the clock for that last run. That would have been. Because if that wasn't done, then they lose that game because the ball still would have been in homeboy's hand before the shot went up, which is I guess it was the right call. I'm not saying that it's not. I mean, it's the right call, right? I mean, it's just how often do you see the referees go back and fix that?
Don't you hate when? Don't you hate when referees actually do the right thing for once?
Now you want to do your job
so many times.
Now,
yeah. You're wrong so many times, and then now it's like, oh, of course. The only time they're appropriate is when it's a screw us. If shoes on the other foot, you would be just as bad as you always are.
Right. Also, and then to Jeremy's point about Kevin Overton, I think it was after that. I think it was like a fast break, something or other, and he tried to take it to the hole, and he probably should have pulled back because there was a couple of Iowa State defenders down there. I don't remember exactly the play, how it happened, but I think that also attributed to the missed free throws. Obviously, I'm feeling really good about where we're at whenever Elijah goes to the free throw line at that juncture in the game. I'm like, all right, cool. One of the best free throw shooters on our team. He misses one, and then Chance goes back to, clean up his mess, essentially. And he does the same exact thing. And it's just like, man, you have veteran guys, both seniors, super seniors, I believe, that, these are big moments of the game. And this is whenever you need those guys to come clutch. And unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. Other than that, there's just nothing that Jeremy didn't touch on enough about, exactly how it was. I mean, I feel the same about everything else, how it played out.
So with going into overtime, Iowa State has all the momentum. It doesn't help that Curtis Jones makes a 3-point shot right at the beginning. But again, I think right after that, Christian Anderson makes a 3-point shot to answer. Raider rides back in it. That Christian Anderson 3-point brought the crowd right back in it. That same pop that I was talking about earlier is right back in it. Tech goes on a 7-0 run at that moment to kind of take control of this, right? A 4-point lead with a minute and a half to go. I was like, okay, we're back in the same spot we were just 5 minutes ago, where we have a 2-possession lead with about a minute to go. What can we do with this, right? And once again, you get into this scenario, right? It was at one point, you get into the scenario where, okay, now we're in a free throw shooting contest. There was that foul that Jeremy talked about that was a little ticky-tack, but it was, I would say it was the right call. Darren Williams just kind of hit him on the arm there. And you get into this free throw shooting competition, and you in a scenario where it's, okay, who is going to make the shot that we need to win the game, right? Iowa State has the lead off of a Josh Jefferson jumper, but Darren Williams comes right back and makes it. And then the foul to end all fouls, right? That's that swipe on the arm there. And we just and it's funny because everything we're complaining about from Texas Tech side, we're like, all right, like in my head, I'm like, let's be real. They're down 1. We just need who is Josh Jefferson to miss 1 free throw. We just need Josh Jefferson to miss 1 free throw. We just had 2 90% free throw shooters go up at the end of regulation, and both of them miss a free throw. Surely Josh Jefferson, the 6'9", 240-pound big man for Iowa State, surely the guy that is a good free throw shooter himself, 82% free throw shooter himself, but 90, you know what I'm saying, on the road, hostile territory, surely he'll miss one of these. Nope, made them both, no problem. I don't even think it hit rim. He was like, what y'all talking about? I go, you think I won this? What do you think I am? A Red Raider? No, I'm gonna make these. I don't have trauma. Our fans don't have the trauma that y'all have. Okay, I'm gonna make these. And so, sure enough, he does make them. And so we're down by 1. And guys, let me say, Otzelberger does not call a timeout. We don't have any timeouts. And Otzelberger had one. Iowa State had a timeout. Flip side scenario now, shoes on the other foot. Down by 1, the defense doesn't call a timeout. He says, sorry, Tech, I'm not bailing you out. So if we talk about, different strategies, Otzelberger does not call a timeout and says, let's go. Now, I will say, we go coast to coast in 4 seconds. That is plenty of time to go coast to coast. I personally think Darren Williams had a great shot to win the game. He rises up in the paint, nobody in front of him, and just goes a little too hard. It's a tweener. Not hard enough to hit the backboard, too hard enough to get into the rim or get inside the net, and it hits the back of the rim. And that's just because it had everything. He went coast to coast, great time. They were scared to foul. He rises up and has probably the best shot you could possibly have to win the game, and it just does not fall. Joe, that is heartbreak.
And what's crazy about that's his second one this year. The St. Joe's game, he had the same kind of look and the same kind of spot as well. So, yep. So that's 0 for 2 and, clutch knockdown walk-off wins and he's 0 for 2. It's really tough. I mean, you can't ask for a better shot to end a game. You like your chances with one of your better players taking the last shot inside the block. It's like, hey, you can't ask for anything more, and for it just not to fall, it was tough for sure. But yeah, tough.
That's a great point. There in another universe, Texas Tech is 13-2 with those 2 game-winning shots, and likely ranked at that point too, right? Like that is a very good point. Sitting there, that shot right there. Also, Jeremy, it made me think, why don't players use the bank shot anymore? Because listen, if this was 1985, that bank shot is used. We win the game. That's what I got no shame about. The second I saw that shot, I'm like, use the bank. That is, you don't even got to size it up and think 2 shots. No, throw it off the glass. All right,
brother. They got the square on the backboard for a reason. Use it.
Yeah. I know it ain't sexy, but Tim Duncan's a Hall of Famer off of it.
Hey, man.
You know what I mean?
That's
Like,
right.
use
Fundamentals.
the bank. Yeah, the square. Like your 4th grade basketball coach. Fundamentals. But Jaron, what do you think about the end of that of overtime there?
Disaster. No, man, I didn't. Last shot was great. Last shot was exactly where I wanted it to be, who I wanted it to be. I'd say 9 times out of 10, he gets that for you. It just wasn't there. And, it is what it is. This game should have been over in regulation. I think everybody in the arena knew that. The energy kind of did dip down a little bit after overtime started, which for me, I was like, yeah, I think everybody's kind of tired of this one. A little bit exhausting. So, there was a moment where I felt like we were really going to break away. Didn't get that. Like you said, Otzelberger, great coaching for him not to call a timeout. Like, hey, do it then. And, it fell the way it fell. But I did think at the end of it, despite everything, like incredible performance by this Texas Tech team. Like if you play that way down the stretch, you're going to have a lot more convincing wins, against other good teams, because this was great basketball. Like there were of course like periods where dry spells, like what are you guys thinking, like this, that, and the other. But in the largest frame, like you did well. And the only reason I think defensively even things got dicey in the second was because when Toppin went down, we switched to a zone, because it was like we can't really play man anymore because we ain't got nobody to man up against the big guys. So switch to a zone, and as soon as when we switched to a zone was the first time that they hit a 3. By the way, go back and watch it. And as soon as they hit that 3, I was like, oh no, the zone. So like for me, Texas Tech basketball, like the defensive prowess comes from man. I will stand on that. I will stand on that. So, if we can get healthy, if we can stay healthy, if we can play our game the way we played against Iowa State, I really think that, this is a team that really wants to be tournament. Because we popped up on that, whatever metrics Twitter account was like, this could be a Final Four team if it all goes well. I'm like, can you shut the hell up? you shut your mouth.
I mean, to that point, if we you're right. Despite the loss, this is the best Tech team we've seen all year. This was the team that we were advertised in the preseason. Like, this was it. I haven't seen this Tech team all season. I have not once seen this Tech team, and this is the team that we thought we would be getting. And so, if they play just like this, we're going to win the next 5 games. Right, that's K-State, Arizona, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, TCU before going on the road to Houston. Those 5, this team in this way wins those next 5 games. And with our resume, with how we've played up to this point, I think we kind of need those 5 games. That we kind of need to get on that winning trajectory before we play Houston. But yeah, I do. And it's interesting that after this loss, we actually went up in KenPom. Right, we were coming into this game. We were 18th on KenPom rankings. We're now 17th. We went up in KenPom. Our defensive rating went up 4 spots. Not very often that you give up 80. Not very often that you give up 85 points and move up in defensive ranking. But one, that shows how bad we were defensively beforehand. And 2, I still don't think we played bad defense overall for 40 minutes. I think this is just a very good Iowa State team that we actually played really well. I think we played them, to the best. I do think this is the best team in the Big 12. So we're also getting an opportunity to see what the best looks like, knowing that we can hold our own. So, the best way for us to hold our own is to go to charliehustle.com. charliehustle.com is where we can all go for the number 1 spot for vintage attire here for the Big 12. They're based out of Kansas City. My Houston Texans are playing the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend, and I do not feel great about it. And one of the reasons I don't feel great about it is I know the Chiefs are decked out in Charlie Hustle gear. We know Pat Mahomes is decked out in Charlie Hustle gear. And so they're going to have the best stuff for Texas Tech attire, Kansas City Chiefs attire if you're a Chiefs fan. So make sure to go to charliehustle.com and use our promo code 101215, TEN1215 for 15% off of everything on that site that's not on sale. That's 101215, TEN1215. charliehustle.com. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. So, guys, Texas Tech does kind of start this 5-game stretch in Manhattan, Kansas this weekend. We have had some run-ins with the Wildcats the past few years, right? K-State has shown that they are a basketball power. But the thing about the K-State basketball program, and maybe not power, I'm going a little overboard there, but show that they can play some basketball over Manhattan. Problem with Manhattan, the Kansas State Wildcats, is that they have a great season. They have a season of lore. They have a season where they're like, basketball, we're here. And then 2 years later, they look like the worst team amongst the Power 5 teams, or Power Conference teams in the country. And this is that year. This is 2 years removed from them being a Final Four contender. And guess what, guys? They stink. They're not good. I'm not going to say Jerome Tang's on the hot seat, nothing like that, just because they did have a great team 2 years ago. But all the goodwill he's built up is gone, right? Or it's fleeting. Maybe not gone, but it's fleeting, fast. This is a team that has lost 6 of the last 7 games. This is a team that is, with the last loss, is sub 500 on the year, 8 losses overall, a 30-point loss to Houston at home this past weekend. Giving up 87 points in regulation. This Kansas State team is just not good, Bob. Joe, what do you have to think? Any thoughts on a team that is right now ranked? Excuse me, a team that is right now ranked lower than Arkansas State in KenPom and is 96th overall. What do you think there?
Yeah, Jerome Tang, the Sonny Dykes of the Big 12 basketball coaches. It's just first year kind of caught lightning in a bottle, and then kind of hasn't been really much since. So it's weird because they beat Cincinnati early on, and you're like, oh, there's another team that that could cause problems in the Big 12, but Cincinnati doesn't quite look like what they were predicted early on. And then dropping 4 straight, TCU, Oklahoma State into Houston by 30. Man, tough sledding for them, and they do have some players on that team. They have Brendan Housen, ex 4-star guy from Amarillo. What was the kid's name from Illinois that came down? Hawkins, I believe, from Illinois' basketball team with TJ Shannon, and then whenever they made their run in the tournament a couple years back or last year. So it's really interesting to see this team struggle. I don't think Tang's on a hot seat, but I do see there are many issues with this basketball team, and this is a game that we don't need to take lightly, because this is one of those games where that typical Tech saying comes back, and more times than not. So we have to go there prepared and ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is, I think, when it comes to games like this, good teams beat teams they're supposed to beat, and this is one of them, right? It's a game I fully expect Tech to be favored. They're actually Tech favored against Iowa State, which I found interesting. But it's another game that I fully expect Tech to be favored. Right now, ESPN gives us a 77% chance of winning this game, even on the road, right? And obviously, Houston made it known that it's not hard to win on the road. I think Manhattan can be a tough place to play, but when they're bad, it's not. And I think that's the case for most places. So a Tuesday night game in Manhattan at 9:00, late game too. That's kind of crazy. But at 9:00, against the crowd that's not going to be there, very exciteful. You should not just beat them, but I think you should beat the brakes off them. I think this should be not a close game, Jeremy.
Yeah, Kansas State's been losing each game worse and worse against quality opponents, and I was going to point out, thank you, Joe, for that. Like, they did get that ranked win over Cincinnati, but then Cincinnati fans are now going like they'd rather just not have a basketball program at all. So it's like,
right.
That game didn't mean anything for either team, honestly. So Tuesday night, an empty arena there in Manhattan, probably. I mean, there's no reason to watch this Kansas State team. And so find something else to do, students, right? You got school starting on Thursday. You might as well just, party it up while you can. And that's not at the stadium. Have a good time there. So not a lot of worries here. And I'm kind of with you that Texas Tech has shown a lot of grit and a lot of gumption in the past couple of games, that this would be a really good stamp, getting a 15-plus point victory, even on the road, to solidify some confidence, to, build that, trust with each other, and just bounce back, get a bounce back game. Cause like you said, we got a good stretch here before a really big one against Houston that, you got to build as much momentum as possible.
Yeah, no, I think I would definitely agree with that. So kind of starting off with some of the guys that they do have on this team. We've talked about David Nguesson, that's been on the K-State team for a few years now, an older transfer from Virginia Tech. So currently their leading scorer at 12.7 points per game and 7.7 rebounds per game, right? He's a pretty big guard, right? So I won't even consider him a guard. He's a wing. He's a pretty big wing, guy that can handle the ball, but also really go north to south, drive in pretty well, good mid-range shot there. So definitely somebody to watch out for. We also have Brendan Housen, who, that name may sound familiar because in the past few years, he's a guy that is a national he's a guy that, not a national championship winner, but he's a guy that did a lot of great things over at Villanova, right? He was a marksman overall for the Villanova Wildcats, coming off the bench for them and being kind of their seventh guy. And so now, going to little old Kansas State, right? I mean, he's a guy from Amarillo that you were talking about, Joe. But seeing what he can do, and he came to Kansas State for playtime. He came to Kansas State to kind of be able to spread his wings out a little bit more, and he's been able to do so. Now you have a situation where he's jacking up almost 8 threes a game. I mean, he's somebody you definitely want to keep an eye out for. I think he's Elijah Hawkins, who's a pretty good defender himself, saying, hey, man, don't you make sure that at all times make sure that you have an eye on number 11 at all times, and that you D him up, because he's going to shoot it from everywhere. He has the Steph Curry green light, and he's had a program that's going to give him that Steph Curry green light, and so definitely watch out for him. You mentioned Coleman Hawkins again, another big guy that's going to work out for him. So I think for both him and Nguesson, you do kind of have a twin tower situation a little bit for them, but both guys, though they're big, can still handle it, dribble it a little bit. I think one thing that's interesting about Hawkins is at times he can be a little big for nothing. To where it's like you this big, but you're not getting rebounds like you should. Right. And so but I think this is staying on the board, not letting you get putbacks. I think you're going to be a really big thing. And he was the guy that Joe, you were mentioning, was a transfer from Iowa. And then of course, Max Jones. Another guy kind of rounds up the starters there on the perimeter, transfer from Cal State Fullerton. And he just getting an opportunity to play Big 12 basketball, but another one that we need to just watch out for. And let's beat them while they're down. Like you mentioned, they've lost 6 of the last 7. They're getting used to losing. So let's make sure that they are used to losing in that way. So as we get into our Prize Picks predictions, Prize Picks, download the app. If you ain't done it before, just download it. We're going to give you $300. $300 using our promo code TAKES12, TAKES12. That's TAKES12, and you get a 100% match up to that $100. It's free money. Download it and get to working on Prize Picks with our promo code TAKES12. So, Jeremy, give me a Prize Picks key to this game for Texas Tech to pull away with a good win in Manhattan.
Free throws, no. I'm joking. JT Toppin, healthy. I'm interested to see what the damage on the ankle is, right? This team is just different without him. Even if he's on the court, if he's not feeling 100%, it just doesn't look the same. And that's going to be true whether we're playing Iowa State or if we're playing Kansas State, top or the bottom, because like our identity revolves around him. It's not a bad thing, but it's bad whenever he's hurt. So JT Toppin healthy, Texas Tech, massive victory. Did you also want the score prediction?
We're just with keys right now, Playboy.
Okay.
Joe, what do you got as your key to the game?
My keys are simple, just the fundamentals of basketball. I mean, rebounding, free throws, like Jeremy said, even though he didn't say it because he backed off of it, didn't stand on business, but whatever. We'll leave that alone. But yeah, fundamentals, turnovers. I mean, going on the road, yeah, I don't expect it to be some kind of hostile environment there. I only expect there to be like a Baylor-like crowd, like 2,500 people. It's just really hard to get up for a team that's lost that many games in a row. So I honestly think is just don't overcomplicate things. Just do the fundamentals right, and then just go out and get a win. And it's easier said than done, but like I said, don't overcomplicate things. So just take care of the fundamentals of this game.
Good key there. I think mine is just listen. Mine is just show them what you're made of. I'm not gonna overcomplicate this. Right? Show them what you're made of. You're better than them. You're better than them. Show that you're better than them. Be better than them. I think it's really just simple as that. A part of me almost questions whether JT Toppin should play in this game. Right? But I do. I'm not gonna go that far because I do think that this team or JT Toppin really needs to know how to play together. There was so much a time frame where it was like, all right, well, let's rest up JT. Let's make sure he's healthy for conference play. And, I think that is instead made it to where now they're just not learning how to play with each other. But maybe restricted minutes. Maybe instead of him playing 35, he plays 25. Right? Like maybe that's what it is. But you got to be in a situation where you're not in a dogfight with one of the worst teams in the conference. You got to go out there and put belt to A. So so let's not overcomplicate it. So Joe, I will say, with all that being said, what is your prediction for this game?
Good guys, 80-60, Texas Tech.
80-60, 20-point victory for the Red Raiders. That's quite the prediction. Texas
I get the vibe. I get the same kind of vibe from like whenever we played Utah. Not to cut you off, but yeah. Same kind of vibe.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That sounds very similar in that aspect. Jeremy?
81-65, Texas Tech.
81-65. So you also think it'll be a score in the 80s and against the score in the 60s. Oh, that's what? How?
No, we already used the banner. No. Boo.
Aren't you an original? No. I'm putting it right back to you. Okay. Putting it right back to you. But I'm also going to follow Jeremy's lead and be unoriginal and say, what about 93-65? That's the same score as the Utah game. Because I do think it's going to be just like the Utah game. You're the better team. Just as simple as that, right? Put Bell to A. I just think that this team will give up because I'll say this: K-State gave up against Houston. They gave up. That game was over. They absolutely gave up in that game. And so I think a similar thing will happen here. They've given up recently, 30-point loss to Houston. Before that, lost by 13 to Oklahoma State. They had 2 close games, one including a close loss to TCU, which is also a bad team, and then the win against Cincinnati. But they also lost by 19 to Wichita State, lost by 17 to St. John's, right? This is a team that is lost by 11 to LSU. This is a team that's going to give us a double-digit loss. And so I fully expect it to happen. So Texas Tech, at least by 15. I think all three of us have them winning by 15 plus, and that's, I think, expected. At least a 15-point win is what I would expect from the Red Raiders. Us being in a dogfight at the end of the second half is not would not be a good showcase there. Other stats about this game, though, even though I buried the lead more than I usually do, Texas Tech has actually won 7 of the last 10 games against Kansas State. They are, and this game right here is the rubber match. There's 25. We have won this game, we've in this series, we've won 25 and lost 25. So this would be the game that kind of gives somebody the lead. We have won the last 2 times we've played this Kansas State team. But the last time we did lose to Kansas State was the last time we played at Kansas State. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens in this game. Actually, I would say the last 2 times we played Kansas State, we've lost. So this would be our first win in Manhattan since February 6, 2021. So let's see if we can get that done. So as we kind of switch gears a little bit and do our, typical Lady Raider mention, right, and talk about where that program is before we head out of here. The Lady Raiders, I know this is going to be a shock to everybody, but they played the 11th ranked team in the country, TCU, and they lost. They did improve, though. They did improve. Last time they played out, they went out and only scored 17 points in the first half. Okay. We knew they were going to do more than that. They were going to do better than that. We knew Coach Gerlich was going to have them ready to improve on that 17-point embarrassing performance. They scored 21 points in the first half of this one. But hey, I'm not going to sit here and besmirch that. They scored 21 points in the first half of that game, but I'm sure in the second half, they, similar to the last game, they upped the ante, they upped the production. They were going to score more than 21 points. They're not going to do 21 points and do even worse. Obviously, they were going to improve the score. In the second half, they scored 22 points. That is this Lady Raider program at home against TCU. For the longest time, actually, I felt that it was, no matter what this program was going through, at least TCU was going to be there in the conference. But TCU has went out and said, we'll buy this program to be good again. And guess what? They're 17-1. They're 11th ranked in the country. They're a dark horse. They're a Final Four candidate. Haley Van Lith is on their team, dropping 22 points. Adona Prince is on their team, dropping 10 rebounds. That's just how much this team is. Our team, the Lady Raiders, scored 4 points in the fourth quarter. 4 points. That was it. They were down 12 at halftime. They were down 14 going into the fourth quarter. And then, you know what's better than 14? Losing by 26. And that's where we're at. So yeah. That's we talked about it extensively in the last episode. I'm not going to harp on it anymore. We knew that if the team played. Anyway, I don't know if there's anything else to add to that, Jeremy.
Not really, man. I hate to be cynical. They have played 3 top 25 teams back to back to back, but at the same time, if you're scoring 4 points in a quarter, that's something much, much worse than and at home, right? It's just like, okay. I saw someone who tweet like, I don't really pay attention, but should we be having a conversation about Coach Gerlich? And somebody who does pay attention, I'm like, I don't know. Hard to say right now. Hard to say. So we'll see how they kind of respond against the upcoming opponents that are not ranked against Iowa State, BYU, and then Houston, a team they've already beat. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. We did just play the 3 best teams in the Big 12. The only other team that we will play for the rest of the season as good as those 3 is TCU again in Fort Worth. So there is a beauty in the fact that you've already been dealt the worst that the conference has to you. And did you do a good job in those games? No. But that's as bad as it's going to get, right? So, luckily you can sit back and you can – it's not like you're going to play a team that is coming off of winning 3 of their last 4 games and beating Arizona by 21 in the next game. Because they're not ranked, so it's fine. You'll be good, okay? It's not like we'll be going off of a team that just won back-to-back road games or anything like that, right? This team will be okay. It's not like we have a team that's right now trying to fight to go to the NCAA tournament because they've just had some of the best stretches they've had the last few years. Right? Oh, wait, no, we are. We're playing Iowa State. We're not going to – that's another game where we're favored to lose. It's a game where we're going to go on the road. We have a 17% chance of winning that game. Like that's – so we're talking about the worst stretch here and those 3 tough games. We're like, okay, we'll be fine. We got whooped all 3 games. There's a level between whooping and still losing. And that's what we're probably going to end up seeing in Ames coming up for. I don't know. It's just going to be tough. And it's almost like we came into the season – we came into last year thinking that last year this team was on the right trajectory. We're doing what it takes. We're about to this is a team that should be NCAA tournament or bust. And then not only do we bust, we busted hard. We're coming into this year knowing that there is a recruit that almost looks like she is just begging the Lady Raiders to just show some layer of visibility. And non-con, we did it somewhat. And then now we're looking like every bit of suck that we have looked. Now we're on a 4-game losing streak. We look like the Kansas State men's team on a 4-game losing streak. And now we're about to play Iowa State that's won 3 of the last 4 that has an 83% chance of winning the game in the Hilton Coliseum. I just don't feel really good about this program and about our chances and to be improved whatsoever. So there's that. Anything else you want to say to the people, Joe?
Nope, I'm good. Oh, no, Jeremy? Shout out to my mom.
Mama Z. Jeremy, what you got?
Nothing, man.
There you go. So with all that being said, I do think the Red Raider basketball team and the Lady Raiders are on 2 different trajectories, right? Both teams lost over the weekend against top 12 competition. One gave us one loss in a way that still gives us hope as we go forward in the season, even though it was a loss. The other one just makes us just that much more depressed as we think about the rest of the season. But as we look back at the men, there were some solace there. I think the next 5 games is games where you see, okay, what is the team about? I think if we're sitting back and we're looking at the men's basketball team and going into that Houston game, and we are, instead of right now, we're 2-2 in conference, instead we're 7-2 going into that game. That's where I want this team to be. That's where I think this team can be. But if we play like we did this past Saturday, right? Because you're going to get opportunities to get wins throughout here and build up that resume. But you're going to have to – it's time to start stacking wins. We're 11-4 right now, right? And this ain't football. I know that sounds great in football, but it ain't great right here. We're 11-4 with a very weak schedule. We got to start stacking wins, and it starts on Tuesday night in Manhattan, Kansas. Let's get it done. For the Red Raider expert that is Joe Lopez and the people's champ that is Jeremy Gillen, this is your boy, Albie Short, and you have been listening to the Tortillas Takes podcast, part of the 1012 Network. As always, stay wrecked, people.